Someone told you that you said something in your sleep last night. There's a name for this, and a gentle mechanism behind it. Not your secrets slipping out. So what is your sleeping brain actually doing? The quiet truth is this. The words rarely mean what they seem to, and often connect to nothing you were thinking at all. Welcome to Sleepy Science. What surfaces in sleep talk is a brief crossing of wires as the brain half wakes, not a window swinging open onto anything hidden. Let your jaw loosen and your tongue rest heavy behind your teeth. The muscles that shape every word are going quiet now, un by un. And somewhere in that stillness, a voice can still slip through. So understanding how begins with what sleep itself really is. Somewhere in a quiet house tonight, a sleeper murmurs a few words into the dark, then falls silent again, remembering nothing. Perhaps you have been told that you do this. Perhaps you have listened to someone you love do it. A soft sentence, a name, a fragment that seemed to arrive from nowhere at all. Underneath everything we will wander through over these slow hours sits one gentle question, and we will not hurry toward its answer. What actually happens inside your brain in the moment you begin to speak in your sleep? Let that question simply rest beside you, unhurried. There is nothing to solve right now, only a quiet curiosity to carry softly as the night settles in. Speaking in your sleep has a proper name, one that scientists have used for well over a century. It is called somniloquy, from the Latin words for sleep and for speaking. It is not a rare curiosity or a sign that something has gone wrong. It is one of the most common things a human body does in the night, quietly shared across cultures, age, and languages the world over. Researchers place it among the parasomnias, the ordinary, usually harmless behaviors that surface at the edges of sleep. Knowing that it has a name, a history, and a whole field of gentle study behind it can be its own small comfort. You are not the only one. You are, in fact, in enormous company. Just how common is it? Surveys of large populations suggest that roughly 2/3 of people report having talked in their sleep at some point in their lives. That is not a fringe experience. That is most of us. Among young children, it is especially widespread, with many talking on and off through their earliest years and simply growing quieter with time. In adults, it tends to come and go. A stretch of murmured nights, then long silence. So, if you have ever felt singled out or strange for it, let that feeling loosen a little. The far more unusual thing, statistically speaking, would be to have gone through an entire life without your voice ever once slipping loose in sleep. What does sleep talking actually sound like for most people? Most of the time, it is remarkably modest. A low mumble, a single unclear word, a half-formed phrase that trails off before it finishes. The great majority of episodes are brief, often only a few seconds, and quiet enough that no one else in the house even stirs. Whole coherent sentences, delivered with feeling, do happen, but they are the exception rather than the rule. much of what emerges is closer to the sound of speech than to speech that carries a clear message. Picture it less as a hidden confession and more as a doorway creaking softly on its hinge. A sound the sleeping house makes, meaning little, disturbing no one. There is a fear that many people quietly carry about sleep talking, and it deserves to be answered plainly and early. The worry that in sleep you might reveal a secret, confess something true, or say aloud what you would never say awake. It is worth setting this down gently. The content of sleep talk is usually simple, fragmentary, and disconnected from any deliberate meaning. It is not a truthful window into your hidden self, and it is not evidence being spoken in some inner courtroom. The sleeping brain is not composing honest testimony. So, if embarrassment has trailed you here, let it soften. What surfaces in sleep talk almost never carries the weight we fear it might. Here is another quiet reassurance, and it is one of the most consistent findings in the whole field. People who talk in their sleep almost never remember doing it. The words rise and fall entirely below the surface of awareness, leaving no memory behind them when morning comes. This is why sleep talkers are so often startled to be told what they said, because to them, nothing happened at all. There was only sleep. That forgetting is not a flaw. It is a sign of how deeply the speaking is woven into the sleeping state itself. Whatever slips out returns to silence and is gone. You do not lie awake accountable for it. You simply wake, unburdened, into an ordinary morning. Much of what surfaces in sleep talk, when researchers have carefully recorded and studied it, turns out to be strikingly ordinary. Bits of the day, half references to work, to errands, to conversations already had. Occasionally, a word that makes no sense in any context at all. It is fragmentary by nature. Rarely a full story. Rarely a clear argument. Rarely anything that would hold together if written down. This ordinariness is itself telling. If sleep talk were truly a channel to some deep hidden self, we might expect it to be dramatic and revealing. Instead, far more often, it is mundane. The night is not staging a confession. It is simply letting a little loose speech drift up from the shallows and settle again. To understand where these murmured words come from, it helps to picture the shape of a night's sleep. Think of it not as a single flat state, but as an unfolding landscape the brain moves through in waves. Sleep is not one thing. It is a sequence of distinct stages, cycling gently again and again, each with its own rhythm and its own character. Scientists divide the night broadly into two great territories: non-REM sleep and REM sleep, the sleep of dreams. Within non-REM, there are further stages, from the lightest drifting off to the deepest, slowest rest. You cross this whole landscape several times a night without ever knowing it. Let us walk through it slowly, the way you are drifting through it now. The first stage of non-REM sleep is called N1, and it is the softest threshold of all. The brief, floating passage between waking and true sleep. It usually lasts only a few minutes. In N1, your muscles begin to loosen. Your breathing evens out, and your thoughts start to lose their straight lines, wandering into odd little fragments. It is the stage where you might feel yourself falling and twitch gently awake, or where a stray image drifts by that makes no sense. N1 is shallow and easily interrupted. A small sound can lift you right back out of it. It is less a room than a doorway, the gentle first step down into the deeper quiet that waits below. Below that threshold lies N2, and this is where you actually spend the largest share of your night, roughly half of your total sleep, cycle after cycle. N2 is a stable, genuine sleep, deeper than N1, and it carries two small signatures that scientists can see in the sleeping brain. Brief bursts of activity called sleep spindles, and sharp, gentle waves known as K-complexes. These are thought to help protect sleep and to quietly sort through the day's memories. In N2, your heart rate eases, your body temperature drifts down, and the outside world grows faint. It is the long, patient middle country of the night. Not the deepest, not the lightest, but the place where most of your resting hours are quietly spent. Deeper still is N3, often called slow-wave sleep or deep sleep, the most profound rest of the night. Here the brain settles into long, slow, rolling waves, and you become very hard to wake. Someone calling your name may not reach you at all. N3 is the sleep that leaves you feeling truly restored, and it is heaviest in the first part of the night, thinning out as morning approaches. It is during this deep territory that the body does much of its quiet repair work. If you have ever surfaced from sleep feeling thick, heavy, and disoriented, unsure for a moment where you are, you were very likely climbing up out of N3, the deepest floor of the whole sleeping house. And then there is REM sleep, named for the rapid eye movements that flicker beneath closed lids, the stage most richly filled with vivid dreams. REM is a curious and beautiful paradox. The brain becomes remarkably active, in some ways nearly as active as waking, while the body's large muscles are held in a state of near complete stillness, gently paralyzed. This stillness is protective. It keeps you from physically acting out the dreams unfolding in your mind. REM periods grow longer toward morning, which is why your most elaborate dreams often come just before you wake. It is a strange country, an awake-seeming mind inside a resting, quieted body. Hold that image gently. It matters for the question we are following tonight. So a night of sleep is not a straight descent into darkness and back. It is a cycle. You move down through N1, N2, and N3, then rise back toward lighter sleep and into REM, then begin again. Each full loop lasts roughly 90 minutes, repeating 4 or 5 times before dawn. Early cycles hold more deep N3. Later cycles hold more REM. This gentle rising and falling means that across a single night you pass many times through the lighter, more wakeful edges of sleep. And it is precisely at those edges, those thresholds between one stage and another, that the most interesting things tend to happen. Keep that rhythm in mind, unforced. It is the ground beneath everything that follows. There is one more idea we need, and it is the quiet key to our whole question, the notion of a partial waking. Sleep is not a locked door that is either fully shut or fully open. The brain can, for a moment, lift only part of the way toward wakefulness, some systems stirring while others stay deeply asleep. It is neither true sleep nor true waking, but a brief in-between, a momentary lightening of the sleeping state. These partial wakings are entirely normal. They happen many times a night in everyone, usually leaving no trace and no memory. Most pass in silence. But in that half-lifted moment, the door is open just wide enough for something to slip through. These partial wakings tend to cluster at the seams of the night, the transitions where the brain is already shifting from one stage to another. As you rise from deep N3 toward lighter sleep, or move across the boundary into REM and back, the sleeping state naturally thins for a moment. It is a little like a tide that never fully goes out, but does draw back now and then, briefly uncovering what lies just beneath the surface. Most of the time, nothing follows. You simply drift on. But occasionally, in that thinner moment, a piece of the waking machinery flickers on for a breath or two before the deeper quiet closes over it again. That flicker is where our answer begins to live. It helps to know that these ordinary partial wakings are not something going wrong. They are a built-in feature of how healthy sleep works. A sleeping brain that could never lift toward waking at all would be a dangerous thing, unable to rouse you from a real threat. A fire, a cry in the next room. So the capacity to surface partway is protective, woven into us by design. Sleep guards you precisely by staying a little permeable. Sleep talking, then, is not a malfunction of that system, but a small side effect of it. The harmless overflow of a brain doing exactly what it is supposed to do, resting deeply, yet never entirely closing itself off from the world. Now we can begin to gather these threads. Speaking requires machinery, the parts of the brain that plan words, and the muscles of the mouth, tongue, and voice that carry them out. In ordinary deep sleep, that machinery is quiet, idling, offline. But in a brief partial waking, a fragment of it can flicker into motion while the rest of the mind stays asleep. A momentary activation of the speech and motor systems, arriving without any conscious intention behind it. No decision is made to speak. There is simply a small, spontaneous stirring of the apparatus of speech, running for a few seconds on its own. And out of that stirring, unbidden, a word or two escapes into the room. This is why sleep talk so often sounds the way it does. Loose, unfinished, oddly toned. When the speech machinery flickers on without the full waking mind to steer it, what comes out is not carefully composed. It may be a fragment with no clear beginning, a phrase that stops short. A word spoken flatly or with strange emphasis. The usual conductor is absent. Only a few players in the orchestra have stirred. That is not a sign of a hidden message struggling to get out. It is the natural sound of speech produced without the deliberate self behind it. Understanding this can dissolve a great deal of the worry. What you hear is mechanism, not confession, running briefly in the dark. It also explains, gently, why sleep talk leaves no memory. Laying down a memory you can later recall requires the fuller involvement of the waking brain, the systems that stamp an experience so it can be found again. In a partial waking, those systems stay largely asleep. So the speech happens. The sound leaves the mouth, and yet nothing is recorded on the inside. It is a little like a light switching on in an empty room and switching off again. Something occurred, but no one was present to remember it. This is why the sleeper wakes with a clear conscience and a blank slate. The words were real in the air, but they were never real to you. Certain things can make these partial wakings, and the sleep talk that sometimes rides along with them, more likely to appear. Stress and anxiety are common companions. So are fever and illness, sleep deprivation, an irregular schedule, and alcohol before bed. Each of these gently roughens the surface of sleep, making the brain more prone to those thinning, half-lifted moments. This is quietly good news. It means a stretch of talkative nights is often not a mystery from the depths, but a simple echo of a hard week, a late night, a body under strain. As life steadies, the nights usually steady too. The voice in the dark is frequently just reporting the weather of your waking days. Sleep talking also tends to keep company with the other parasomnias. Sleepwalking, night terrors, the confused half-waking that children sometimes pass through. They share a common root, that same tendency of the brain to lift part way toward waking without fully arriving. And there is often a family thread running through it all. If you talked in your sleep as a child, there is a fair chance a parent or sibling did too. These patterns travel gently down through families. None of this points to anything broken. It simply describes a particular, inherited style of sleeping, a brain a little more inclined to surface and stir in the night, carrying, now and then, a few soft words up with it. Let us pause and let what we have gathered settle for a moment. A picture has been quietly forming, of a sleep built in layers and cycles, of a brain designed to lift partway toward waking, of speech machinery that can flicker on without the waking self to guide it. And already the question we began with is starting to turn in the hand. We asked what happens in the brain when you talk in your sleep, half expecting the answer to lead inward, toward some hidden meaning. Instead, it keeps leading toward mechanism, toward timing, toward the ordinary architecture of a night. The deeper we go, the less it looks like a message, and the more it looks like a moment. That is where the next stretch begins. It is worth naming clearly what all of this means for the old idea, the notion, so widespread and so persistent that sleep talking is a secret channel to the subconscious, a place where buried truths escape past the guard of the waking mind. The gathered evidence points somewhere calmer. What surfaces is usually fragmentary, usually mundane, usually unremembered, and usually disconnected from any deliberate meaning at all. It is far better understood as a brief motor speech event riding on an ordinary partial waking than as a window into anything hidden. This does not make it less fascinating. It simply moves the wonder to a truer place. From the drama of secrets revealed to the quiet marvel of how a resting brain is built. And here is perhaps the most freeing thread to hold. Because sleep talk arises from the timing and architecture of sleep rather than from intention. It can happen in almost any stage of the night. It is not confined to dreaming, not confined to deep sleep, not the property of one single moment. Wherever a partial waking thins the sleeping state enough for the speech machinery to flicker, a word can slip out. In light sleep, in the depths, at the edges of REM. This is why sleep talk has always seemed so unpredictable, so scattered across the night. It follows the openings, not a schedule. It goes wherever the door happens, for an instant, to stand aha. So we arrive at the close of this first stretch with a gentler understanding than the one many of us were carrying when we lay down. Sleep talking is not a confession, not a leak of secrets, not a verdict in the dark. It is a brief breakthrough of speech, the mouth and voice stirring for a few seconds during a partial waking, at almost any point across the sleeping night, while the deeper mind stays quietly at rest. Common, harmless, unremembered, and usually meaning very little. If you came here carrying worry about a voice you cannot control in the night, you may let a little of that weight go now. There is nothing here to be ashamed of. There is only a brain, doing what brains do. You've been with us for a while now, and your breathing has likely softened without you noticing. A soft subscribe helps another sleepless mind find this sanctuary too. Now, let's pause together, one sleepy soul at a time. You just heard that speaking in sleep is only a brief stirring of the voice while the deeper mind stays resting. Nothing spoken against you, nothing to answer for. Let that settle where the last of the worry has been sitting. Somewhere in you, a small guard has been standing watch over what you might say in the dark, and it can step down now. There is no secret waiting to escape, no confession being quietly prepared. Feel how the jaw loosens when it no longer has anything to protect, how the breath lengthens on its own when nothing needs guarding. The question we opened is still turning, softly, and it is leading you somewhere calmer than you feared, away from hidden meaning, toward the simple, forgiving mechanics of a resting brain. You do not have to follow it awake. Let one slow breath go, and let the night carry you a little further in. Sleep talking begins with a small mismatch in timing. The brain does not switch off all at once and wake all at once. Different regions can drift across the border between sleeping and waking at slightly different moments. When the circuits that shape speech briefly grow active, while the regions that hold full awareness stay quietly asleep, a few words can slip out. This is a boundary blur, not a full return to the waking world. Nothing has gone wrong. Your brain is simply managing many systems at once, and now and then one of them speaks a little ahead of the others. Researchers describe this as a partial waking, a state where part of the brain surfaces toward alertness while the rest stays submerged in sleep. The motor systems that move the lips, tongue, and vocal cords can receive just enough signal to act, even though the thinking, planning mind remains offline. It is a little like a hand that twitches during a dream. The body carries out a fragment of an action without the full person deciding to. In sleep talking, that fragment happens to be speech. The machinery of talking runs briefly, quietly, and on its own, without you ever choosing the words. Sleep talking is not tied to a single stage of the night. It can happen in every kind of sleep the brain moves through, from the lightest drifting moments near the surface to the deepest, slowest waves, and even during dreaming sleep. This is part of why it feels so unpredictable. There is no single doorway it comes from. Wherever the border between sleeping and waking can soften for a moment, a few words may find their way out. Knowing this can be reassuring. It does not mark a particular kind of night or a particular depth of sleep as somehow wrong. Still, sleep talking is not spread evenly across the night. It tends to gather in the lighter stages of non-dreaming sleep, the shallower floors just below waking, and in the brief moments when the brain half surfaces between one stage and the next. These lighter waters are where the border is thinnest, where a speech circuit can flicker awake most easily while the deeper self stays at rest. Episodes can still appear in the deepest sleep, but they are less common there. The pattern points to something gentle and mechanical. Talking follows the places where sleep is naturally lightest, not the places where the mind is most exposed. The kind of speech that comes from non-dreaming sleep tends to be simple and unpolished. Often, it is little more than a mumble, a single word, a half-formed phrase, or a sound that never quite becomes language. Someone might murmur a name, count softly, or say something that trails off before it means anything at all. There is no story behind it, no argument being made. The speech circuits are firing with very little guidance, so what emerges stays rough and brief. If you have ever heard a sleeper mutter and then fall silent, you have heard exactly this. A fragment, not a message. Speech that surfaces from dreaming sleep can be a little different, because the dreaming brain is busy building scenes and conversations. Words spoken during this stage may loosely echo whatever the dream is doing. A reply to someone who is not there. A reaction to an event only the sleeper can see. Even so, what actually leaves the lips stays fragmentary and disconnected. You might catch a phrase, but not the scene it belongs to. The dream stays sealed inside. Only a stray edge of it slips into the room. What you hear is a loose echo of imagery, never a clear report of it. When you speak while awake, an enormous amount of hidden work happens first. Your mind chooses an idea, finds the right words, arranges them in order, and quietly edits out whatever should not be said, all in a fraction of a second. In sleep talking, almost none of that machinery is running. The words are produced without planning, without editing, without the steady oversight that shapes waking speech. What comes out is raw output from the speech system alone, missing every layer of thought that normally stands behind it. That is exactly why it so often sounds strange, out of place, or only half finished. Here the quiet question of the night begins to turn. We started by wondering what happens in the brain during sleep talking, half expecting some hidden self to be speaking. What the mechanism shows instead is gentler. This is a motor system briefly breaking through, not a person confessing. The mouth moves because a speech circuit flickered on for a moment, not because some buried truth pushed its way to the surface. The words carry no secret cargo. Seen this way, sleep talking looks less like a window into who you really are, and more like a reflex catching a little light on its way past. Because the guiding mind is offline, sleep speech often arrives with no context at all. A sleeper might announce something about a train, a stranger, or a task from years ago, with no thread connecting it to the actual moment. To a listener, it can sound eerie or oddly specific, as though it means more than it does. But the strangeness is the whole point. These words were assembled without the sense-making layer that normally keeps speech on topic. They are pieces without a picture. The oddness is not a coded message waiting to be read. It is simply what language looks like when it is built with the lights half on. One of the most telling details is how rarely anyone remembers speaking in their sleep. Almost always, the words are gone by morning, and the sleeper is surprised to hear they said anything at all. The reason is simple and reassuring. For a memory to form, awareness usually has to be present, and during sleep talking, that awareness was never fully online. There was no one home to record the moment. This is another sign that the mouth was moving on its own, apart from the conscious self. If even the person speaking cannot recall it, the words were never really theirs to own in the first place. This is why sleep talking makes such a poor truth serum. A genuine confession requires a mind that means what it says, that chooses the words on purpose and stands behind them. Sleep speech has none of that. It is not coherent, not deliberate, and not reliably tied to any real thought or intention. The words fall out in whatever shape the speech circuits happen to make, unguided and unowned. Treating them as honest revelations, mistakes, noise for meaning. There is no hidden interview happening in the dark. No deeper self quietly telling the truth while the ordinary one sleeps. There is only a system briefly talking to no one. You cannot interrogate someone who is talking in their sleep. People sometimes try, leaning close, asking questions, hoping the sleeper will answer honestly from some unguarded place. But the sleeping brain is not listening in the way waking conversation needs. A sleeper may respond with a word or a sound. Yet it is not a true reply. It is another fragment shaped by whatever is drifting through, not by your question. The exchange only looks like a conversation from the outside. Inside, there is no partner across the table. Nothing said this way can be trusted as answer, agreement, or admission, because no one awake was there to give it. Much of the mystery around sleep talking lies in the listener, not the sleeper. When we hear a stray phrase in the dark, our waking mind rushes to make sense of it, filling the empty space around it with meaning it never carried. A single muttered name can seem to hold a whole story, simply because we supply the story ourselves. The sleeper, meanwhile, has done nothing but let a few sounds escape. Understanding this can quiet a lot of worry. The words were never a verdict on the relationship, the day, or the heart. They were loose fragments, and the meaning was ours to invent or to set down. Notice how the worry loosens as those words lose their weight. Nothing whispered in the dark was ever a judgment for you to carry. Your breathing may have settled into something slower now, thoughts spacing a little farther apart. Let one long breath move out, unhurried, and set down whatever you were still holding. From here, we drift gently deeper into how the sleeping voice actually works. Sleep talking that rises from the deepest, slowest sleep tends to be the hardest to make sense of. In these heavy stages, the brain is at its furthest from waking, so any speech that escapes is usually brief, blurred, and almost impossible to understand. A low murmur, a groan, a word smeared into sound. Because the sleeper is so deeply under, these episodes are the least likely to be remembered and the least connected to anything real. They are the clearest example of pure mechanics at work, the vocal machinery stirring far below thought, producing sound without a single trace of intention behind it. Put together, the picture is remarkably consistent. Across every stage of the night, the light floors, the deep waves, the dreaming hours. Sleep talking works the same basic way. A speech circuit briefly breaks through while the rest of the brain stays asleep, and a few unguided words slip free. The stage only changes the texture, not the nature. It is always a fragment, never a full account. This is why the sleeping voice can be met with such ease. It is not a hidden self stepping forward to speak. It is the body's talking machinery running for a moment on its own, harmless and unowned, in the quiet. Here is the reassurance so many people are waiting for. Sleep talking almost never spills your secrets. The speech that surfaces is fragmentary and unplanned, stitched from scraps rather than confessions. A sleeping brain is not narrating a hidden diary. It is producing loose motor output while most of the thinking mind stays offline. Studies that recorded hours of night speech found it mostly mundane, garbled, or nonsensical, rarely a clean sentence, almost never a meaningful reveal. So if you worry that the dark hours might betray you, let that worry soften. What comes out is noise far more often than truth. And no one can interview you in your sleep. A popular fear is that someone could lean close, ask the right question, and coax the truth from your resting lips. But the sleeping brain is not listening for cues the way a waking one does. Sleep talk erupts on its own timing, disconnected from the room, unresponsive to prompts. Occasionally, a sleeper mutters something that seems to answer. Yet it is coincidence, not conversation. The words were already forming. You cannot be cross-examined in the dark. Whatever surfaces arrives unbidden and unguided, following no one's questions but the brain's own scattered wiring. Certain nights make sleep talking more likely, and knowing them can ease the mystery. Stress is a common one. A mind carrying tension into the dark stirs more restlessly, brushing closer to the surface where speech can slip out. Sleep deprivation does something similar. When you are badly short on rest, the brain's later recovery sleep runs deeper and more turbulent, and brief half-wakings multiply. Neither means anything is wrong with you. It simply means the machinery of sleep was pushed a little harder than usual. En calme, better rested nights. The talking often quiets on its own, asking nothing from you at all. Other triggers arrive from the body itself. A fever can loosen the boundary between sleeping and waking, which is why feverish children, and sometimes adults, talk more in the night. Illness, in general, disrupts the smooth architecture of sleep, scattering more of those brief surfacings. Alcohol is another. Though it can make you drowsy at first, it fragments sleep later in the night, nudging the brain toward the shallow, unsettled states where speech escapes. None of this is a flaw in character. It is chemistry and temperature and tiredness, moving through ordinary sleep. As the body steadies, the nighttime voice usually settles back into silence. Sleep talking rarely travels alone. It belongs to a family of gentle nighttime events called parasomnias, and these often keep company with one another. A person who talks in their sleep may also, on some nights, sit up, walk a few steps, or pass through a night terror, a sudden burst of fear that the sleeper almost never remembers by morning. They share a common root, a brief, partial half-waking in which the body acts while the reasoning mind stays dim, seeing them as relatives rather than separate alarms makes the whole picture calmer. One quiet mechanism explains the group, and that mechanism means you no harm. If you want to know who talks in their sleep most, look to childhood. Sleep talking is remarkably common in children. Surveys suggest half or more do it at least occasionally, and for many, it happens often during certain years. Their sleep systems are still maturing, the boundaries between stages still settling, so brief surfacings come easily and pass just as easily. The reassuring part is what comes next. Most children simply grow out of it. As the sleeping brain matures, the nighttime speech fades on its own. No treatment required. a child murmuring in the dark is, far more often than not, perfectly ordinary. Sleep talking also tends to run in families. If you do it, there is a fair chance a parent or sibling does too, and twin studies point to a genuine hereditary thread woven through these nighttime habits. That inheritance reframes the whole worry. The question that opened tonight, what is your sleeping brain really doing, turns out to have a gentler answer than a hidden confession. What you inherited is not a secret-telling flaw, but a tendency for the sleeping brain to voice a little as it stirs. It runs in the blood the way a laugh or a gait does. Familiar, harmless, and entirely yours. Most sleep talk happens in lighter sleep, but there is one gentle exception worth naming softly. Normally, during dreaming sleep, the body is held still, a natural paralysis that keeps you from acting out your dreams. In a condition called REM sleep behavior disorder, that stillness loosens, and a sleeper may speak, move, or act along with the dream. If those movements are forceful or someone could be hurt, it is simply worth a quiet mention to a doctor, not out of fear, but for care. For nearly everyone else, the occasional murmur or soft phrase carries no such weight and needs no worry at all. So here is the heart of it. Plainly and kindly, for the vast majority of people, sleep talking is entirely benign. It harms nothing. It signals no illness, no hidden trouble, no fracture in the mind. Doctors do not treat it in most cases, because there is nothing to treat. It is simply one of the ordinary things a sleeping brain sometimes does. If it has ever left you embarrassed or worried about what you might have said, you can set that weight down now. You are not broken, and you have not betrayed yourself. You have only slept and spoken and slept on. You just heard that there is nothing here to fix. Nothing you gave away. And if a small knot of embarrassment has been sitting in your chest all this while, let this be where it loosens. Feel your breath moving now, unhurried, asking nothing of you. Whatever slipped out on some forgotten night belongs to sleep, not to your worth. Let your shoulders drop a little further into the dark. There is more comfort still ahead, and you can drift toward it gently. And if you would like it to happen less, the path is soft rather than clinical. Sleep talking tends to ease when sleep itself grows steadier. Regular hours, a calmer wind down, less of the stress and exhaustion that stir the brain toward the surface. You do not fight it. You simply give the night less to react to. Protect your rest. Let the days land more gently, and the nighttime voice usually grows quieter on its own. There is nothing to conquer here. Tonight, you can let the whole small mystery rest. The sleeping brain speaks sometimes, and it wishes you nothing but sleep. Think of sleep less as a switch and more as a tide that moves through the brain unevenly. Researchers have found that different regions can drift into sleep at slightly different moments, and some can stay lightly active while their neighbors have already gone still. This is sometimes called local sleep. Your brain is not a single lamp clicking off all at once. It is a whole city of small lights dimming on their own schedules. Sleep talking lives in exactly this unevenness. One district still lit while the rest of the street has gone dark. Within that uneven landscape, small patches of the brain can briefly flare back toward waking, while the deeper regions sleep on. Scientists sometimes picture these as islands of activation, pockets that light up for a moment and then subside. When the island that happens to flare belongs to the motor speech system, the mouth may move and a few words may leave you. Nothing planned it, and nothing chose the words. It is simply one small region doing what it knows how to do, for a breath or two, before the tide of sleep rolls back over it. Brain recordings have caught this middle ground directly. In some sleep studies, the electrical patterns of deep sleep and the patterns of waking appear at the same time, in different places, in the same head. One area shows the slow, rolling waves of rest, while another briefly shows the quicker rhythm of alertness. It is not a glitch in the reading. It is a genuine mixed state. Sleep speech tends to surface from exactly these moments. When part of you is clearly resting and another part is, for just an instant, doing something that looks a little like being awake. This is the quiet correction to an old assumption. We tend to imagine sleep and waking as two separate rooms with a firm door between them. The evidence points to something softer, a gradient rather than a cliff, a slope you descend and climb many times a night. There are shades between fully asleep and fully awake, and the brain moves fluidly among them. Sleep talking is not a sign that something went wrong with the door. It is a small, ordinary consequence of the fact that the door was never as solid as we pictured it. So the border between sleeping and waking turns out to be porous. And sleep talking is one of its gentlest proofs. A few words crossing that border does not mean you failed to sleep properly, or that your mind is unsettled. It means only that the boundary is the kind that lets small things through. Un wort, un murmure, a half-formed phrase. Almost everyone crosses that threshold in tiny ways each night without ever knowing. The voice that slipped out was simply riding across a line that was always more like mist than like a wall. Across a normal night, you rise gently toward waking many times. Brief liftings so short that morning keeps no record of them. Most pass in complete silence. Occasionally, one of these small liftings coincides with that flicker in the speech region, and a sound escapes. This is why sleep talking often arrives without any lead-up you could notice, and leaves without a trace you could recall. You were not lying awake composing anything. You floated a few inches toward the surface. A word came loose, and you sank again. The whole event lighter than a single turn of the pillow. There is something reassuring in how ordinary this makes it. Crossing lightly between rest and waking is not a flaw unique to you. It is part of the standard design of a sleeping human. Children do it. Adults do it. People who never say a word in their sleep do it too. The only difference with sleep talking is that one of those crossings happen to carry a sound. The machinery is the same in everyone. You are not doing sleep incorrectly. You are doing exactly what a resting brain does, with the volume briefly turned up on one small part. Because the words surface while the fuller self is still offline, they arrive as fragments rather than confessions. There is no editor awake to arrange them into meaning. No planner choosing what to say or holding anything back. What comes out is closer to an echo than a message. A piece of the speech system moving on its own, disconnected from intention. This is why sleep talk so often lands as a stray phrase, a name, a scrap that fits nowhere. It was never assembled to reveal anything, because the part of you that assembles meaning was quietly asleep. Consider what stays offline in these moments. The regions near the front of the brain that plan, judge, and monitor what you say. The parts that give speech its intention and its care remain in the slow rhythm of deep rest. Speech can flicker without them, but it cannot be steered by them. So there is no coherent author at the desk. No self-weighing words and deciding to speak. There is only circuitry firing briefly in the dark, unsupervised and unaimed. The voice is real, but the deliberate speaker you might fear is listening for simply isn't there. This absence explains why sleep talk so rarely makes sense. Without the planning regions awake, words arrive unmatched to any situation. An answer to no question. A sentence with no context. A tone that fits nothing around it. People laugh, argue, mumble grocery lists, or speak in fragments that dissolve on contact. If sleep talking were the hidden self-confessing, you might expect it to be coherent and pointed. Instead, it is loose, mismatched, and strange. Exactly what you would expect from speech machinery running with no one at the controls to give it shape or direction. Much of the worry around sleep talking comes from the listener, not the speaker. When we hear words, we instinctively assume a mind behind them choosing to speak. That is how waking language always works. So, a bed partner hears a phrase in the night and reaches for its meaning, its motive, its message. But intention is precisely the ingredient that is missing here. They are supplying a narrator that the sleeping brain never provided. The words are genuine sounds. The purpose the listener imagines behind them is added afterward. By a waking mind doing what waking minds do. Once you see that, the particular fear, that sleep might expose some secret self, begins to rest on a premise that was never true. To reveal yourself, there would have to be a self awake enough to do the revealing, choosing words to let something out. That self is asleep. What speaks is a fragment, not a confessor. There is no hidden narrator using the cover of night to say what you would not. There is only tissue and rhythm, briefly active, shaping sound without anyone behind it. The thing you are guarding against has no one there to do it. People have listened to sleeping voices for a very long time. And for most of that history, they heard something larger than biology. In many ancient cultures, words spoken in sleep were treated as omens, messages slipping in from gods, spirits, or the future. carried on a voice that seemed to bypass the ordinary mind. To speak while asleep looked like proof that some other channel had opened. It is a beautiful idea, and an old one. But it belongs to folklore and meaning-making, not to what we can now watch happening inside a resting brain. That older view had its own quiet logic. If a person spoke without willing it, the words must come from somewhere beyond the ordinary self. So they were read as truth-telling, prophecy, or the voice of another presence. Across cultures, the sleeper's murmur was something to interpret, even to trust. We can hold that history gently, as a record of how deeply people have wanted the night to mean something. And we can set beside it what the instruments show, not a channel to elsewhere, but a familiar system briefly active while the rest of the mind rests. It is tempting to assume sleep talking is simply a dream spoken aloud, but the two rarely line up. When researchers compare what people say in their sleep with the dreams they later recall, the match is usually loose or absent. Speech can surface in stages of sleep where vivid dreaming is unlikely, and the words often connect to no remembered story at all. So the murmur in the dark is not a live broadcast of your dream. It is its own small event, born from the speech system stirring, not a narration of the film playing behind your eyes. Culture has long loved the image of the sleeper who cannot help but tell the truth, the character who murmurs a name or a secret and gives everything away. It appears in stories, plays, and old romances, because it makes for a powerful moment. The guard finally down, the heart finally honest. It is a lovely piece of storytelling. But it is storytelling. The appeal says more about how much we wish the night would confess for us than about what the sleeping brain is actually able to do, which is far more modest and far less pointed. When the idea is actually tested, the confession story does not hold. Studies looking for links between sleep speech and a person's hidden feelings, guilt, or secrets find little to support it. The content tends to be mundane, fragmented, or unrelated to anything weighing on the speaker's waking life. There is no reliable line running from what troubles you to what you say in your sleep. The romantic version, that the night pulls truth out of us, is simply not what the evidence describes. The words are noise from the machinery, not signal from the soul. If you would like sleep talking to happen less, the gentlest levers are the ordinary ones. Sleep talk tends to rise when sleep is broken or the days are heavy, when strain runs high and rest comes short and uneven. So the same things that steady sleep tend to quiet it. Regular hours, a wind down that lets the mind slow, less weight carried into the dark. None of this is a cure to chase, and none of it is required. It is simply that a calmer, steadier night gives those small flickers fewer moments to slip into sound. Sometimes sleep talking arrives with a fever or a passing illness, when the body is working hard and sleep turns shallow and restless. In those nights, the boundary you have been picturing grows even more porous, and words cross it more easily. This kind of sleep talk is nothing to read into. It is a temporary effect of being unwell, and it tends to fade as you recover and your nights settle back to their usual depth. If it appeared with a fever, let it leave with the fever. No meaning needs to be attached to it at all. In children, sleep talking is so common, it is closer to the rule than the exception. Their sleep is still finding its shape. The crossings between rest and waking are frequent, and words slip across easily. Parents often overhear whole conversations that mean nothing and are forgotten by breakfast. For nearly all of them, it is entirely harmless and asks for nothing. And time itself is the quiet remedy. As sleep matures over the years, most of it simply eases on its own. There is rarely anything to fix. Only a child sleeping out loud for a while. If you are the one lying awake beside a sleep talker, this is perhaps the most freeing part. There is nothing to decode. The phrase that drifted across the room was not aimed at you. Not a coded message. Not a window into a feeling being hidden. It was a fragment with no author behind it. You can let the words pass the way you let a car go by outside. A sound in the night. Not a statement to answer. There is nothing there to be hurt by, and nothing there that needs a reply. For nearly everyone, sleep talking asks for no treatment at all. It causes no harm to the sleeper, leaves no mark on the day, and drifts in and out over a life without ever needing attention. It is only worth a gentle look when it travels with real distress, when nights are badly disrupted, or paired with things that genuinely disturb rest. Even then, the care is aimed at the sleep, not at the talking. On its own, a voice in the dark is not a symptom to solve. It is a common, harmless feature of a resting human. Here is what the whole night has quietly been assembling, piece by piece. The voice that surfaces in sleep is not a hidden self, finally speaking. It is a fragment of the speech system firing on its own. One small region flaring back toward waking, while the mind that plans and means and chooses stays asleep beneath it. There is no author behind the words, because the part of you that authors is resting. What sounds like a confession is only circuitry briefly at work in the dark, shaping sound without intention. Not a window opening, just a light flickering, alone. Sit with how much that lifts away. The words were never a verdict on who you are, never a leak from some sealed room inside you. They were a mechanism doing a mechanical thing, unsupervised and unaimed, and then going quiet again. Nothing you value about yourself lives in that flicker, and nothing you fear about yourself is exposed by it. The self you actually are, the one that chooses, remembers, and cares, was doing the wisest thing available in the dark, which was simply to rest and let the small machinery hum on without it. Notice how the breath moves without you arranging it, rising, falling, needing no permission from you to continue. The night has been circling toward one quiet idea. What spoke was never you, only a small light flickering on its own. Let the worry you have carried about it loosen its grip and drift slowly down. There is nothing here you have to answer for, and nothing left to guard. Carry this gently into the rest of the night. The murmur in the dark was never a message, and it was never a mirror. It asked nothing of you, revealed nothing about you, and meant no more than the sound of the house settling around you as you sleep. The embarrassment can set itself down now. There was no one to overhear the real you, because the real you was resting, whole and unbothered, the entire time. What surfaced was only a fragment of sound, already gone. And you are free to let the night stay quiet. A voice in the dark is one of the oldest sounds a house can hold. Yours, tonight, is only that, a soft disturbance of air, no different from a sigh or the turn of a page. It carries no message it needs you to receive. It asks nothing of the room. It is simply the body, half lit by sleep, letting a little sound escape the way a window lets in the night. Whatever leaves your mouth in sleep is not a confession. There is no listener inside you gathering evidence, no ledger being read aloud. The words arrive the way weather arrives, assembled from fragments, passing through, meaning nothing they were sent to prove. You are not on trial in the quiet. You are only a sleeper, making the small sounds that sleepers have always made, in every language, in every darkened room. The worry of being overheard is heavier than anything you could ever say. Notice how it loosens now. Even if someone were near, they would hear only fragments, a word half-shaped, a phrase that dissolves before it lands. Nothing whole, nothing that could be held against the morning. The fear imagines a clear sentence waiting to betray you. But sleep does not speak in sentences. It speaks in mist, and mist keeps no secrets. The border between waking and sleep was never a wall. It is more like a shoreline, the water moving in, the sand giving way, neither fully one thing nor the other. Speech sometimes crosses that soft edge, a small wave reaching a little further up the shore than the rest. It does not mean the tide has broken. It means the boundary is gentle, and gentle things are allowed to spill. Sleep talking can rise from any depth of the night, from the light shallows near waking, from the slow, deep hours, even from the country of dreams. A brief surfacing lets the voice through, then lets it go. It is not tied to one stage, 1 hour, one meaning. It is only the body coming up for a breath of sound, the way a swimmer breaks the surface without ever leaving the water. By morning, the words will be gone. Not hidden, gone. The way most of the night is gone, unremembered and unmissed. The sleeping brain rarely saves what it says. There is no recording, no transcript. Your waking self can be handed. Whatever passed your lips has already returned to the quiet it came from. You wake with nothing to explain, because there is nothing left to find. You are allowed to set down the fear of what you might say. It has kept a small light on in you for a long time, watching, guarding. Let it rest too. There is no version of the night where a stray word undoes you. The people who love you have heard the sounds of your sleep before, and loved you still. Nothing you murmur here changes what the morning already knows. Think of the sounds a night makes on its own. The house settling. The wind testing the eaves. A branch brushing the glass. Your sleeping voice belongs to that same family of gentle noises. Unplanned. Unovnet. Part of the texture of the dark. No one lies awake, fearing the creak of a floorboard. Let your own soft sounds join them, ordinary and harmless, woven into the quiet of the room. There is no hidden self waiting for sleep to speak for it. The idea is old and persistent, that the night unlocks a truer voice. But what escapes in sleep is not truer. It is looser, stranger, stitched from leftovers. The self you know in daylight is not being exposed. It is simply resting, while the machinery of speech idles and, now and then, turns over in its sleep. If someone hears you in the night, they are not collecting your secrets. They are lying near someone they care for, hearing proof that you are close, that you are breathing, that you are here. A murmur from your side of the bed is a kind of company. It says, you are not alone in the dark. Even asleep, you are keeping someone company in the quiet. Feel how the edges of you are softening now. The place where thought becomes speech is quieting. The place where speech becomes sound is loosening its grip. Soon even the impulse to shape a word will fade, and only breath will remain. This is the boundary doing what it was made to do, letting you cross, slowly, from the day's insistence into the night's forgiveness. Whatever the night arranges into sound, you owe it no explanation. Dreams borrow faces that are not the people. Sleep borrows words that are not your promises. None of it is testimony. None of it is signed. You will not be asked in the morning to account for a sentence you never chose. Let that knowing loosen the last held breath. There is nothing here to defend. There is something tender about a person talking in their sleep. It is so human, so undefended. The guard is down, the effort gone, and what remains is soft and unformed. To hear it is to glimpse someone at their most trusting. There is nothing to be ashamed of in that. The undefended parts of us are not our failures. They are simply the places where we finally stopped bracing. The room does not remember. The walls hold no transcript. The morning arrives clean, carrying none of the night's murmurs into the light. Whatever you said has dissolved into the same air that held it. Untraceable, unweighted, gone. You do not have to gather it back or apologize for its passing. The night is discreet in the deepest way. It forgets on your behalf, so you can wake unburdened. Let the last of the worry go now, the way fog lifts without deciding to. It was never protecting you from anything real. There was no waiting embarrassment, no secret leaking out. There was only sleep, doing what sleep does, making a little sound and letting it fall. You can stop listening for the words you might say. You can close that door softly and follow your breath down. Somewhere tonight, in countless rooms, sleepers are murmuring into the dark. Children, elders, strangers, lovers, all making the same soft, meaningless sounds you make. It has happened every night since there were nights to sleep through. You are not alone in it, and you are not marked by it. It is one of the quietest things all of humanity shares. The voice that speaks when no one, not even you, is home to hear it. A word spoken in sleep is already leaving as it arrives. It has no future, no consequence, no second line. It surfaces and sinks in the same breath, and the silence closes over it without a ripple. This is how the night handles everything you offer it. Receiving, releasing, keeping nothing. You can trust it with your small sounds. It has always known how to let them go. Your body did not choose to speak, and it will not be asked to explain. The muscles of the mouth simply moved. Briefly, the way a sleeper's hand sometimes twitches or a foot shifts beneath the blanket. It is motion, not meaning. Let it be as innocent as a turning over in the night. There is no interpreter standing by. There is only rest, and the small movements rest allows. You are drifting nearer the place where even sound falls quiet. The words grow rarer here, the way lights go out one by one in a settling town. Soon there will be only the slow rhythm of breathing, and then not even the awareness of that. The boundary is porous and kind. It lets you through without asking what you carry. Cross it gently. Nothing follows you here but rest. To the part of you that has felt embarrassed, that has replayed a story of something you might have said, offer a little mercy now. It has worried enough. Nothing it feared was ever waiting in the dark. Sleep is not a stage, and you are not being watched. You are simply resting where resting is allowed, and the softest thing you can do is believe that you are safe. When the voice slips out in sleep, it is a sign of how deeply you have let go. Only someone truly released could speak without meaning to. It is not a lapse. It is evidence of surrender, the very thing you came here for. So if a word escapes tonight, let it be a small sign that you have arrived somewhere restful. Somewhere the guard has finally, fully come down. Almost nothing remains to be said now, and nothing needs saying. The day emptied its words into the hours, and the night is asking for none of them back. You can let language settle like sediment, drifting down and down until the water above it is clear. What is left is not silence as absence, but silence as rest. The deep, unhurried, quiet, the body has been moving toward all along. Nothing you say in your sleep can reach into the morning and harm you. The night keeps its own counsel. It does not gossip. It does not testify. Whatever passed through you has already been returned to the dark, unmeasured and unremembered. You are safe in the deepest sense. Safe to loosen. Safe to drift. Safe to let the last thought dissolve, unspoken. There is nowhere this softness can go wrong. The watcher in you, the one who listens for what you might reveal, can rest now too. It has stood guard so faithfully, for so long. But there is nothing here to guard against. No secret, no slip, no cost. Let the watcher close its eyes. Let the last vigilance dissolve into the same warm dark that is holding everything else. You are permitted, finally, to not be listening. Whatever the night says through you means nothing you need to answer for. There is no secret self on trial, no hidden voice giving you away, only a body at rest, making the soft sounds of being alive in the dark. Let the words come, or not come. Let them dissolve. You are not being read tonight. You are being held. Sleep now, gentle soul, unwatched and unafraid, exactly as you are. 100 facts ago, you lay down carrying a quiet dread that sleep might loosen your tongue and give something away. Now that dread has a shape, and the shape is harmless. We followed the voice as it rose from every depth of the night, from the light shallows to the deep hours to the edge of dreams, each a brief surfacing before it sank again. We watched the words come apart by morning, unremembered, leaving no transcript to answer. What began as the fear of being overheard became the understanding that there was never anything there to find. So here is what you carry now. The night's voice is only a brief breakthrough of sound across the stages of sleep. Never a window into some hidden self. Never a confession. Just a body, resting, alive. Perhaps the worry of what you might say in the dark feels a little lighter now. A gentle like. Subscribe. Or share carries this quiet to another soul lying awake, afraid of their own sleeping voice. One quiet tap, one sleepy soul at a time. Right now, the circuits that shape your words are going still. The pathways that turn thought into speech, and speech into sound, are settling one by one, no longer asked to carry anything. The mouth softens. The voice sinks back beneath the surface it briefly broke. Let your whole self dissolve into that quieting, the slow letting go of a language you no longer need to hold. There is no self here to speak for, and nothing left to say. Only a body, at rest, alive in the dark. You can let the last words dissolve now, like a murmur fading into a dark room until the air forgets it was ever there. Let your jaw loosen. Let the whole weight of your face grow soft. Sleep can carry you now into the place where nothing needs saying, where you are held without a single word asked of you. The Psychology for Sleep playlist has spent many hours in this quiet, where the mind and its mysteries meet. If the sleeping voice means nothing, what is the dreaming mind doing with the words, "It never speaks aloud"? That hour is waiting whenever you are ready. But if your eyes are closed, stay there. Rest now, gentle soul, Nothing you say in the dark was ever yours to answer for. Where science becomes the softest place to rest. Good night.